Hey guys, Lucas here in Adventure Surplus, and today we're going to take a quick look at the Ranger roll. We're going to take a quick look at the history, the two main methods to do it, and then we're going to take a look at ways to kind of bump the heat up if you're using this in a slightly colder situation. So we're going to try to keep this video quick because there's not a whole lot to the Ranger roll, but there's most importantly just some considerations to pay attention to when you're using this. I apologize for all the wind noise today. It was supposed to be a nice day out with no wind, and it's the Ranger roll kind of in the way we think about it today with a poncho and a poncho liner got to start in the Vietnam War when the U.S. military adopted the poncho and the poncho liner. Now, they weren't the first, the Rangers and everybody else that used it weren't the first ones to do it. This method of sleeping and this idea of the components that go into it it's a very old way to sleep. Some people call it cowboy camping. If you look back in the Civil War and older, Revolutionary War, guys were issued out those rubberized kind of tarps and their blankets, and that's kind of how they slept. Sometimes in the field, depending on where they were at. So taking that more water and weather resistant, weatherproof outer layer, and then taking your blanket in there, wrapping up, and you can sleep in most conditions outside reasonably comfortably. But one thing that this leads to is it's not a comfortable way to sleep long term. It is a way to sleep when you need to get sleep right then and there. And we'll touch a little more on that in a second. But history wise, the method we're going to talk about and kind of the method that the U.S. is really familiar with or the U.S. military is more familiar with than guys are, is just what kind of came out of the Vietnam War with the introduction of the poncho and the poncho liner. And it's just a really simple way to sleep because they both interface very well, and it keeps you warm and dry in most conditions, as long as they're not the conditions we'll talk about. But yeah, so let's talk about this first method. We'll go into the second method and talk about some ways to bump the heat up. So this first method, like I already kind of touched on, is the most basic method and the way we kind of get the Ranger roll terminology from in the name. And that is taking a USGI poncho and taking your poncho liner, your whoopee, and then tie them together. So they just interface really easily. Grommet holes match up with tie-down holes, and you tie it all together, fold it over, button it up, and now you have a very basic sleep system. Now, if you look at it, both ends are open, and obviously you have some openings between button snaps. So in those temperate weather, it's not raining too hard. This is a great way to sleep in those warmer summer nights, late spring, summer, early fall, when it's still pretty warm at night. Because it's not a whole lot of protection. It's keeping the worst of the wind off, keeping the worst of the rain off, and you're going to be able to kind of snuggle up in there with the beanie, leaving your boots on, everything like that, and be pretty good to go. Again, it's basic. So with having your front or your top and bottom open, if you are expecting any sort of rain, use your typical considerations you are going to use when you camp, as far as like where you put your tent. Don't put it in a low ground spot where it's going to pull water. Don't put it right next to running water where you can predict running water to run. If you see like a wash, don't put it in a wash. If you have your backpack, put your head up against your backpack, get it further off the ground, pull your poncho up with you, and it will be up with you. That way, water just flows right underneath you. So some considerations you want to pay attention to. Now, as far as packing and carrying this thing, as you can see, there's not much to it. This will fit in your issued waist pack. This will fit in the old butt packs. You have a compression sack, you can shove it in there really easily, and it's going to fit in there and not take a lot of space. In your salt pack, so you can carry this in a smaller backpack if you really need to. If you weren't carrying like any sort of medium ruck or larger backpack, in the salt pack, it will fit in there on the outside there, because you can also just roll this up. You can roll it up, lash it on the front of it, on the side of it, and you're good to go. Now, if you use this in the rain and the poncho got wet, you could separate the two components, hang the poncho on your backpack while you're moving around the rest of the day, and just put your whoopee inside your pack and keep that dry and good to go for the next night. And this kind of leads back into seeing how basic it is. This isn't a method for sleeping long term in all conditions. It's just a way to get some sleep. You're out on patrol, you hit your patrol base, it's your turn to rack out because you're not on guard shift anymore. You get in here and you get your 2 hours, you get your 4 hours of sleep if you're lucky. If you're the lucky dog that don't have radio guard, you don't have any guard shifts, you get in there, you sleep for 6 hours, and you're gonna be more comfortable. So just remember that this method, it's really basic. It's not a whole lot of protection, but it is a way to sleep in warmer weather environments, and especially when the rain isn't too hard. So this is your plan, how to sleep at night on your camping trip or your hiking trip out with the friends and buddies and whatever it may be. Look at the weather first. You can't put a tarp over it, get some more protection from the elements. In the military context, you may not have that option. It may just be this is all you have. But I've slept in this. It's not terrible. Well, I've slept in this method more. It's not too terrible as long as the weather isn't terrible. But yeah, let's take a look at this other method because it's kind of the newer method and it has some more advantages to it over the poncho and poncho liner. All right, so for the newer and kind of improved Ranger roll system, this came about with the adoption of the bivy sacks within the U.S. military, is using a bivy with your poncho liner. As you can see, it's much quicker to set this up than it is with your poncho. You don't have to tie anything together. You just lay your bivy out, get in there with your woobie, and you're good to go. I would say, this is the better way to do it. At the end of the day, it takes up a tad bit more room because the bivy sack. In the Marine Corps one, you can seal it all the way up. In the U.S. Army one, you have a little bit open on your head, but that leads to it being a more sealed system, which leads to it being better because you don't have these gaps. The bottom's not open, it's sealed up. Only the top is open at most, and you can definitely stay a lot more protected from the elements, whether it be wind, rain, light, snow. This is the way I used when I was in the U.S. Army more than once. I used it on deployment, I used it in the field, slept in bivvies with the full sleep system out in the field, stuff like that. So it's much better, much more weather protection when you're doing it this way. Again, it takes a tad bit more space, but it's not that bad. And it's a little warmer too because it holds and traps heat a little better. So if you're wanting to use this for more seasons and more time of the year, the bivy sack's a much better way to do it than the poncho. But the poncho method is just, there's nothing to it, which is a pro and a con. Whatever. But yeah, so that's the newer improved method, is with the bivy sack. Not much to it, but it is quicker setup. So let's take a look at some ways to bump the heat up. If you are using this in slightly colder situations and you definitely want to stay warmer, as outside of wearing layers, because layers are important with this. Wearing a beanie cap, wearing your waffles, wearing gloves, keeping your boots on with dry socks is really important in this method, especially in the military context. Now, if you're a civilian, you're not worried about contact, stuff like that, you're not having to get out to pull guard shifts, you can take your boots off and let your feet breathe and dry off a little bit in the sleeping bag. But in the military context, you don't have that option. You're gonna get in there with your boots, maybe change your socks beforehand, and that's how you're gonna sleep. So, but yeah, enough of that. Let's take a look at some ways to warm up. So bumping the heat up in these, definitely something if you're sleeping in this in a colder environment, it's, those low 50s, high 40s, you can get down into those temps when you bump the heat up. Now, aside from just wearing your layers, like I've already touched on at least once, wearing that beanie, wearing your waffle tops if you have the ability to carry it with you, gloves, dry socks, dry clothes, you can add some components to this that'll still keep it pretty light and pretty easy to pack away, but definitely get you a little further as far as temperatures go. So first off, like a wool blanket, taking an issued blanket, taking just kind of another wool blanket, and putting that in between the poncho liner and the poncho, wrapping up in that, doing the same thing with your bivy sack. That can definitely increase the heat and amount of insulation you're gonna have. A lighter method, easier to pack away method, is to get some like a emergency blanket or a casualty blanket, survival blanket, some that's heavier duty and not just the little baggied ones, because those just rip too easy. There are some reinforced ones out there, but something like this is gonna serve you a lot better. It's got that shiny side. Get wrapped in there between your woobie and whatever you're using, bivy sack or poncho, and that'll definitely bump the heat up quite a bit. But again, in this method, you have a lot of openings for that heat to kind of dump out. This method, it's going to keep you a good bit warmer in there though. So those are two ways to do it aside from just having additional layers on to begin with. And that can get you a little colder, just down to a little colder temps, a little chillier temps. But this isn't really a winter sleeping method. Unless you're just really trying to rough it, I would not recommend that. Unless you just really have the ability to carry this, because once you start adding a wool blanket plus the bivy plus the woobie, you're getting into sleep system weights. So consider that. Is it really worth it carrying this basic of a system when my weight's going to equal out to something that's just a sleep system to begin with? Hopefully that was a quick video. We carry poncho liners, bivy sacks, wool blankets, USGI ponchos are getting way harder to find. It's just, I don't know what happened, is as soon as they stopped issuing them out, even in UCP within the US Army, they disappeared. So getting a issued poncho that you can do this with is just getting harder to do. But the bivy sack method is just a better way to do it in general. So we have bivy sacks and poncho liners to do that if you really want to do this. So make sure you head on over to the website, pick something like this up if it interests you, or if you already have the components, now you know a little more about how to use them together better. I apologize for all the wind noise today. It was supposed to be a nice day out with no wind, and it's windy, very windy. So we're trying to work around as best possible. But yeah, head on over, grab the stuff. Let me know what you kind of want to see in the next videos coming forward this year. More stuff like this, more in-depth reviews on it, more in-depth overviews on it. But otherwise, please like, subscribe, comment, and head over to the website and get to shopping. See you in the next one.